Hey there, and welcome back to the North Dakota Teaching Podcast. I'm so happy to have you listening today. If you're a first-year teacher, you're definitely going to want to drop down to the comments so that you can grab your 10 tips for a new teacher teaching guide that's going to help you feel successful during your first year in the classroom. Again, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you inside today's episode.
Welcome to the North Dakota Teaching Podcast. Whether you're a first-year teacher, veteran teacher, or just a mom trying to gain some new insights, you are right where you are meant to be. Kayla Durkin, founder of the Blossoming Teacher course, is passionate about helping new teachers blossom into the teacher they were born to be. Kayla wants to help inspire teachers to be their best self, whether that means sharing about personal or professional development, self-care, or the latest and most effective teaching strategies. Through this podcast, you will hear from real teachers sharing their stories about teaching, all with one main goal in mind: to be able to make an impact and help other teachers blossom. And with that, here is your host, Kayla Durkin.
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm so excited. Today I have someone on the podcast whose name is also Kayla, but her teaching experience is a little different. Although she's not a first-year teacher, she's actually been an educator for 9 years. She had a rocky first year of teaching, and I think it's a story that you're going to want to hear. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Kayla. Hey Kayla, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, thank you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I taught, this is my 9th year in education. And when I first started out as a middle school math and science teacher. And I did that for 5 years. And then I left the classroom to pursue my PhD. And while doing that, I did a lot of assistantships as a teacher assistant, grad assistant, and things of that sort. And now I am back at public school as a STEM coordinator, and I have the opportunity to work with teachers and students, and it's amazing.
That's awesome. And you said this is your first time working in a middle school?
It's my first time back, I guess. I worked in a middle school to begin with, and this is my first time as the STEM coordinator in the STEM coordinator position.
Awesome. So what made you want to teach STEM?
It kind of really worked out because when I first started, I was math and science, and it's just always been what I've been interested in. And this position, I was looking for a job after coming out of my PhD, and it literally just fell from above. All of a sudden, this position came open. I'm like, this is perfect because I have the opportunity to still work with students, but I'll also get to work with teachers. And that's what I love to do. I got to do that a little bit in grad school. So I was like, yeah, definitely, I'll take this job.
That's super cool. That's really awesome. So I know you kind of had a rocky first year of teaching experience, but you also didn't necessarily think your student teaching experience was the greatest. Maybe we should start there.
Yeah, and I really feel like student teaching is a foundation that helps you as a first-year teacher. So during my student teaching experience, I think the biggest things that were lacking were just the ability to have any autonomy. I actually work with 2 different teachers, a science and a math teacher, and I felt like they taught mostly, and I kind of was a co-teacher. So I really didn't get the skills needed as a first-year teacher as far as organization and trying to figure things out and planning, and of course classroom management, because that's huge, because you can't do all the other things unless you have your class under control. So that led to a struggle my first year teaching, just because the student teaching experience was great in my experience because I didn't have any problems or any trouble with the students, and if I did, it was kind of handled for me, and I didn't have to deal with all of the things that there is in teaching. So yeah, it led me to my first year rocky start.
So you felt like you just weren't planned and prepared enough. You didn't know how to organize things. You weren't really sure where to start. So kind of walk us through that, help us visualize where you were as a first year teacher and what some of the struggles were that you went through?
So I will say that's another thing, the schools that a student taught at compared to the school that I taught at in my first year, they weren't totally different, but they were. So whenever I come in, I had students of very diverse backgrounds that I just wasn't expecting. So I had, of course, behavior problems, but then there were also just different needs that I was not aware of and did not have experience with student teaching. That was very difficult to deal with because as a first year teacher, you have a lot going on. You have stuff coming from everywhere. You got stuff coming from your team, then you got stuff coming from the principal, then you have stuff coming from the district, and you're like, do this, do that, and you're like, and first year teachers this year, oh, bless you, because this is such an interesting year. But it is also a good opportunity, I think, to learn a lot of different things as well. But going in, there were a lot of challenges that I was not expecting, the classroom management wise, meeting certain needs. And then, just as simple as once I got graded my papers, I'm like, what do I do with them? Or like when I took them into 2 grade, I'm like, okay, for middle school, I had like 6 different classes and like 6 different papers and 20 different assignments. And I just didn't know how to handle that. So that's just another thing that was a struggle.
Oh, definitely. For whoever has heard my story, I talk often about the first day of school and a student asks if they can sharpen their pencil. And I'm like, I don't know. Can you? Do I make that decision? Who makes that decision here? Like when you're a first year teacher, there's just so many things you don't know. And that's just so true because every school is so different. Every district is so different. So you don't know once you take your grades, where are you going to put those grades? What classroom management plan are you supposed to be following? So I know now that you've been in the education world for 9 years, you have a little bit more of that under your belt. So what are some good classroom management strategies that work for you now that you know what you're doing?
I think I say there's 2 big managing tips that I wish I would have soaked into the very beginning. And that is, number 1, just be yourself. Because kids, they can read right through you. So I feel like one of the biggest problems that I had personally was that I saw how well the other teachers managed their classrooms and did certain things, and I would try to mimic that, but it wasn't authentic and it didn't work for me. So first of all, when I learned that, I just got to be myself, things just got better. And then the second biggest thing is you have to be consistent. You have to have a plan and you have to be consistent. And because students can tell, like, well, I did the same thing as so-and-so, but you didn't do blah, blah, blah. They know. So if you have a plan, well, this is step 1. If you get it, in trouble or whatever the issue is, this is step 2, this is step 3. And if you have that plan in action, then you will be able to just implement it from that point forward. So I think that's 2 of the biggest things. And there's a lot more that I can share, and I don't know how many you want me to share today.
No, I like that. I like how, first of all, being authentically you is one of the most important things you can do for your students, because they know when you're not being truthful or just not being who you are and who you should be. But my question is, with your plans and your consistency, is there a certain brand, I guess you could call it, that you followed? Like, did you follow Love and Logic or Champs or anything like that? Or what were you following?
So our school, actually my first year teaching, it was more of our team had a certain plan, which looking back, I don't think it was the best plan. There was like 7 steps. And for middle school, I think that's too many. But of course, the first one, you give them a warning. And then the second one, I don't even remember, but you can have something like a behavior reflection where they reflect and have to write about it. And I know this is a lot different than maybe elementary, but then we have like after school detention, which that's different now in COVID world. And then it would move up to administration at that point. And every single time that a student gets a step, there's parent contact involved. So we just have like a school-wide type thing now that we use that everybody follows. So it makes the things a lot easier and consistent throughout the school, which I think is huge too.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. The school that I worked at a couple of years ago, we had like a school-wide matrix, and it was like, if this happened, then you do this. If that happened, then you do that. And that's so nice when obviously not every situation's black and white, but when your school has it laid out for you that if this happens and this is what you need to do, it just makes all of your decisions as a teacher so much easier instead of worrying, oh, did I make the right call? Is that really what I should have done? So I like how you're saying have a plan and be consistent with it. So that leads me to my next question, which is, what's the best teaching advice you've ever received?
So it's kind of like advice, but so I was told by my assistant principal after a meeting that I didn't listen. So that was actually advice for me to listen. I am stubborn, and I consider my personality, I do things trial and error. So I want to do it my way. And if it doesn't work, then okay, I'll learn. So after observations, the administration comes in and they tell me to do certain things. And of course, my first year, me being stubborn, I didn't listen. I wanted to try it this way. So it backfired. So my advice would be to listen to everyone, listen to what your colleagues have to say, listen to what your admins have to say. Because once I started doing that and saying, okay, I am not an expert, which I knew at that point I wasn't an expert, I'm just stubborn. But I listened, I took everything that they had to say and tried to apply it. And that was my trial and error. Instead of trying to do what I wanted to do, try what they wanted to do. And if it didn't work, I could move on. But a lot of people that have been in education, they've been around, they know what to expect and things of that sort. So, I have to listen.
No, I think that's great advice. I think it's so true that there are so many experts right down the hall, right across the room from us in our own buildings. You don't have to go to a different district to find someone who knows what they're doing. And I think we can all agree that in some sense, nobody knows what they're doing. But at the same time, when you take time to listen to what your colleagues say and to just kind of internalize some of the advice that they're giving you, it can be a really beautiful thing too. So you've been in education for 9 years. You now have your PhD. What keeps you wanting to teach? So
I really after my PhD, I got my PhD and everything. I had a year off. I had 2 kids. I was working part-time, but I just missed it. I really did. I missed being in the classroom. I missed being around students. I have kids at home, but they're little, and I worked with middle schoolers. So I really missed the middle schoolers. I was so behind in the trends, and I missed the community that you have at a school, as far as with the teachers and the students and everyone. But I also, cliche, I missed seeing these students light bulb whenever they figure something out. And especially working in science, there's a lot of discoveries that are made. And it's just, I just miss that. Oh, look, Miss Norville, I got it. I don't know if anybody's listening worked with middle schoolers, but it's hilarious. And so
I can definitely relate to that, not being in the classroom this year. There are so many little things. Even when I'm just scrolling through Instagram, I'm like, oh, I missed those parts about being in the classroom. So no, I can definitely, I've already thought about going back into the classroom, so I can see how you taking some time off, you would as well. So for any first-year teachers or student teachers who are listening here, let's just talk about some pieces of advice that you might have for them.
So I know I've mentioned this a lot already, but really and truly, you have to be yourself. And I think that's my number one advice. I'm just gonna say it, because I really feel like that was my biggest struggle, is because I wanted to be like that teacher down the hall that just had it together, but it wasn't me. I'm just have a different personality than a lot of other people. And once I started doing that, I could tell the students really took to it, and they're like, oh, this teacher's okay. And I think another piece of advice, along with being consistent, don't be afraid to give a student a consequence, because if you give a student an inch, they will take it a mile. So an example would be my first year teaching. I remember a little boy, a middle school boy, took a piece of paper, threw it across the room, playing basketball to the trash can. He made it. I was like, oh, that's cool. But then all of a sudden, everybody else wants to do it, and then they do it all the time, and then things escalate. So just know ahead of time that just not happen. We don't throw paper across the room. It's not a thing. The end. That's your warning. And you have to do that. If you think for a minute and say, do you want that to happen in your classroom? And if you don't, you got to stop it.
Right. Sometimes you have to kind of be ahead of yourself and think, okay, it's something small now, but what could this progress into? And I think any teacher, any student teacher, whoever is listening to this, I think that's relatable for everyone, that we all can think of a situation where it was kind of fun when one little student did it, but now you have 15 students doing it and it's just out of control. So no, I think that's great advice too. Well, Kayla, I almost stumbled because we have the same name. If anyone wants to reach out to you and talk about science or math, or even getting their master's degree or PhD or continuing on with their education, I think they might have questions about that. So first of all, where can they reach out to you at?
I am on Instagram at Bright in the Middle with dots in between each word. I'm also on Facebook at Bright in the Middle. TPT is Kayla Renee at Bright in the Middle.
Perfect. And so if anyone's listening and they're a first-year teacher and they're thinking, I definitely know I want to go on and get my master's or even PhD, what advice do you have for them for that?
I mean, just go for it. Figure out what you want to do. And I actually, for my PhD, I don't think I'm doing what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a college professor. And then when I got in, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I miss middle school. But if you really are interested and you have a goal, then do it.
So did you get your master's degree right away, or did you wait a little bit?
I actually got it my first year teaching. I started my second semester, and it just worked out. My schedule and everything, I just went ahead and just did it. It was an online program, so it made things easier.
So do you have any advice for trying to balance that, being a first-year teacher and going through your first year of grad school?
Yeah, I don't know how I did it. I was also planning a wedding, but just one step at a time. I think the first semester I may have only taken one or two courses. And it being, I didn't have any kids at that point, and it was just me. And at the time, he was my fiance, and I just used all my time. I didn't have a social life much, but if you manage your time well, you can work it out. But that may have been another reason my first year was rocky.
There's so much going on during a first year. No one knows what's happening. Well, Kayla, before we go today, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Yes. So going along with what I said about I don't want anyone to hesitate to reach out to get help. And so that's one thing. Another thing I struggled with is I was kind of scared to ask people for help because I didn't want to bother people. So reach out to anyone. And I also highly suggest something that I wish I had when I was a first year teacher is some type of course, because you learn the courses in college, but you can't apply it in college. I mean, you have your student teaching, but first year teaching, it's just different. It's just what it is. So if there was like a course like you have that was there, I mean, I definitely would take it. I'm not going to lie, for sure. I would have taken it. So reach out, Pinterest, Instagram, colleagues down the hall, take a course. Yeah.
I absolutely appreciate that shout out, Kayla. For those of you who are listening and you don't know, I do have a course for first year teachers. It's called the Blossoming Teacher Course, and it is truly just meant to help you blossom into the teacher that you were born to be so that you can rock your first year of teaching feeling confident and prepared for whatever comes your way. So thank you so much for that, Kayla. And again, if you want to reach out to Kayla about STEM, about science, math, about pursuing a master's degree or PhD, whatever it is, you can find her at Bright Middle on Instagram, Facebook. Teachers Pay Teachers, of course, as well. She has some amazing resources, so don't hesitate to reach out to her. But that is all for today. So thank you so much to everyone who listened. Kayla, thank you so much for being on here today. It was truly a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, talk to you later, Kayla.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the North Dakota Teaching Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort. Be sure to tune in to the next episode for more teaching tips to make an impact. Until next time.